At Grandma's funeral, my mom whispered loud enough for everyone. Why did he even come? Grandma never liked his kids. My dad smiled. I didn't argue. I just walked out. What they didn't see. Grandma's lawyer following me to the car with an envelope. When they read the will 3 days later, they reacted so loud the neighbors came outside. My mom's whisper carried through the church like it had a microphone. Why did he even come? She said, right in the front pew. Grandma never liked his kids. She didn't say it to me. She said it about me, loud enough that I watched 3 heads turn. My son, Noah, was sitting to my left in a little black suit that still had a price tag string tucked into the sleeve. He'd been trying so hard to be serious all morning. When my mom said that, his shoulders went up like he'd been slapped with cold air. My daughter, Ellie, was on my right, holding the folded funeral program with both hands like it could protect her. She stared at the casket and didn't blink. That was her thing when she was trying not to cry, freeze her face, and pretend she was made of stone. I felt my jaw lock so hard my teeth hurt. My dad sat beside my mom, calm as ever, wearing the same navy suit he wore to every wedding and every funeral. He heard her. Of course he did. He smiled. Not at me. Not at the pastor. Just smiled. Like my mom had made a clever little joke and he wanted her to know he approved. I didn't argue. I didn't ask my mom what was wrong with her. I didn't make a scene in the middle of my grandmother's funeral. I just stood up. The pew creaked. It was loud in that quiet church. My mom's eyes flicked to me, and for half a second she looked satisfied, like she'd been poking a bruise and finally got the reaction she wanted. I reached down and took Noah's hand first, then Ellie's. We walked past the front row, past my aunt's stiff face and my cousin's curious stares, and out the side door into the cold. The church doors closed behind us, muffling the organ music and my mother's voice. Ellie let out a breath she'd been holding for who knows how long. Noah asked, "Did we do something bad?" That was the moment that made my throat burn. Because this wasn't about my mom being rude. It wasn't about one awful comment. It was about the fact that my kids had learned to ask if they were the problem. I crouched down between them on the stone steps outside. "No," I said. "You didn't do anything wrong. You came to say goodbye. That's what good people do." Noah's bottom lip wobbled anyway. Ellie looked at me and whispered. She said Grandma didn't like us. I swallowed hard. "Grandma loved you," I said, and I meant it so deeply it felt like a promise. I know she did. I was still holding their hands when I heard the door open again. A man in a charcoal coat stepped out, quick but careful, like he didn't want to draw attention. He wasn't family. He wasn't part of the funeral home staff. He moved like someone used to offices and paperwork, not gravesides. "Mason Hale?" he asked. I nodded once. He came down the steps and held out a thick envelope. Cream-colored. My name typed cleanly on the front. No stamp. No mailing label. "I'm Daniel Rusk," he said softly. "Your grandmother's attorney. I'm sorry for your loss." I stared at the envelope like it might bite. He didn't push it into my hand. He waited, respectful. I took it, and it felt heavier than paper should. He glanced toward the church doors, then back at me. "I was instructed to give this to you today," he said, privately, "and to tell you there will be a formal reading of the will in 3 days." I could still hear the organ inside, faint through the walls. My mom's whisper replayed in my head, like it was stuck on a loop. Grandma never liked his kids. I looked down at Ellie and Noah, both standing close to me, both too quiet. Then I looked back at the attorney and said, "Okay." He nodded like he'd expected that answer. "If you have questions after you read it, call me." He handed me a business card. Then he turned and walked away, leaving me on the steps with my kids and an envelope that felt like it had a heartbeat. I'm Mason. I was 42 at the time. I taught high school history in a small district where everybody knows everybody's business and still pretends they don't. My paycheck was steady, not big. Teaching isn't the kind of job you do to get rich. You do it because you like watching a kid's face change when they finally understand something. Or because you need health insurance and you believe in decent work. Ellie was 11. Noah was 8. They weren't mine by blood. They were mine by choice. I married their mom, Sarah, when Ellie was 5 and Noah was 2. Sarah had been through a lot before me. She came with 2 kids and a heart that flinched at loud voices. I didn't step in. I didn't help out. I became their dad. I did the school pickups. I learned how Ellie liked her grilled cheese. Extra crispy, no tomato soup, because the texture made her gag. I learned that Noah slept better if you rubbed his back in slow circles until his breathing evened out. When Sarah got sick, I sat in hospital chairs and signed forms I barely understood. When she died, I stood at the graveside and promised her I'd keep them safe. And I did. Legally, too. I adopted them. Their last name became mine. Their school records listed me as father. Their doctors called me dad. My parents never said the word adopted like it was neutral. They said it like it came with an asterisk. My mom would introduce Ellie and Noah as Sarah's kids, even years later. My dad would say things like, "Well, you know what I mean," whenever he forgot their birthdays. And I kept trying anyway. Because you don't want your kids to grow up without grandparents. You want them to have someone who slips them candy when you're not looking. Someone who shows up at school concerts. Someone who says, "That's my grandbaby," like it's the easiest thing in the world. That wasn't my parents. But my grandma, my dad's mom, Irene, was different. She was the one who learned Ellie's favorite color, green, but not bright green. Forest green, like the woods. She was the one who kept a little jar of pennies just so Noah could count them and feel important. She didn't do grand gestures. She did quiet, steady love. And she did something else, too. She noticed what my parents did to me. Because my family didn't just treat my kids like outsiders. They treated me like a resource. It started small after Sarah died. Cards with thin sympathy, then immediate questions about practical things. "Are you going to keep the life insurance?" My mom asked 2 weeks after the funeral, like she was asking if I wanted a second helping of potatoes. A month later, my dad mentioned their property taxes were getting rough. Then my mom's car needed a little help. Then my sister, Kendra, needed a short-term loan for something with the kids. I told myself it was family. I told myself they were struggling. I told myself it was temporary. It never was. For almost 5 years, I was their quiet emergency fund. I paid $540 a month toward my parents' mortgage because my dad retired early and didn't plan well. I covered their electricity bill twice in winter when my mom called crying about shut-off notices. I sent my sister $300 a month for after-school care, even though I later found out it was going toward a gym membership and a leased SUV. I bought my parents a new water heater when theirs broke because my dad said, "Well, I guess we'll just take cold showers," like it was my job to fix it. They never thanked Ellie and Noah for anything. They barely looked at them when they handed over handmade cards. But they always looked at me, always checking if I was still the kind of son who would pay to keep the peace. Grandma saw it. She didn't say much, but she saw it. Sometimes she'd pat my hand when my mom started in on money talk. Sometimes she'd change the subject. Sometimes she'd look at my dad with a sharp little stare that made him clear his throat and go quiet. I thought that was all she could do. I didn't know she'd been doing more. After the funeral, I drove my kids home. I didn't open the envelope in the car. I couldn't. My hands were too tight on the steering wheel. And Ellie kept wiping her cheeks with her sleeve like she was mad at herself for crying. At home, Noah went straight to his room and shut the door. Ellie sat at the kitchen table, still wearing her black tights, and stared at the salt shaker like it was fascinating. I put on the kettle because it gave me something to do. Then I opened the envelope. Inside was a letter from the attorney, crisp and formal, and beneath it, a second envelope. This one was sealed with a little gold sticker. My grandmother's handwriting was on the front. "Mason." My hand started shaking. Not dramatic shaking. The kind you try to hide by gripping the edge of the counter. I opened it carefully. The paper smelled faintly like her house. Like soap in old books. The first line made my vision blur. "My sweet boy, if you're reading this, it means I didn't get to say goodbye the way I wanted." I sat down hard in the kitchen chair. Ellie looked up instantly, alarmed. "Dad." I cleared my throat. "I'm okay," I said, but my voice didn't sound okay. I read the letter twice. Then a third time. Grandma wrote about Ellie and Noah by name. She wrote about their drawings on her fridge. About Noah helping her water the porch plants like a little man. Then she wrote the line that made my stomach drop. "I know what they say when you aren't in the room." I kept reading. She wrote about my mom's comments. About my dad's silence. About my sister's needs that always landed in my lap. And then she wrote, "I also know what you've paid. Not just in money. In dignity." There was a second page. On it, she listed numbers. Dates. Checks. She had been keeping track. Not to shame me. To protect me. At the bottom, she wrote, "You don't have to buy your place in this family. And you don't have to let anyone buy it from you, either." My throat tightened so hard it felt like swallowing rocks. Ellie's chair scraped softly as she stood up. She walked around the table and put her hand on my shoulder, gentle like she didn't want to scare me. She loved us, Ellie said quietly. I nodded once. Yeah, I managed. She did. Noah came out of his room, drawn by the silence. He stood in the doorway and asked, Is Grandma mad at us? I turned the letter so he could see her handwriting. No, buddy, I said. Grandma wasn't mad at you. Not even a little. He stared at the page like it was a magical thing. Then he whispered, I liked her. I know, I said. I folded the letter back up and held it against my chest for a second, like a shield. Then I looked at the attorney's formal note again. 3 days. Well, reading. And suddenly my mom's whisper didn't just feel cruel. It felt rehearsed, like she was trying to claim the story before anyone else could. That night, after the kids were asleep, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open. I stared at my banking app for a long time. I'd had the same setup for years, one separate account labeled Family Support. Automatic transfers went out every Friday morning. $250 to my parents, $75 to my sister. Sometimes extra when my mom called with her emergencies. I used to tell myself it was easier this way. Cleaner, less stressful. But I thought about Noah asking if he'd done something bad. I thought about Ellie freezing in that pew. I thought about my dad smiling while my mom erased my kids out loud. And I realized something simple. They were taking my money while refusing my family. So I made one decision. I turned off the transfers. Right there at the kitchen table. I clicked Cancel Recurring Payment. One by one. I waited for each confirmation screen. I took a screenshot of each one and saved it in a folder because I'm a history teacher and I believe in documentation. Then I closed the laptop. That was it. No long speech. No warning text. Just one clean financial move. And for the first time in years, my chest felt like it had room in it. The next morning, my phone lit up at 7:06 a.m. Mom. I let it ring. At 7:10, a text. Did you seriously leave the funeral? Call me. At 7:12, another text. Your father is upset. You embarrassed us. I stared at the screen and felt nothing but tired. At 7:25, my sister texted. Mom says you stormed out like a child. You better not make this week harder. Harder. Like my kids sitting in a church hearing they weren't liked wasn't already hard. I didn't reply. I got the kids to school. I went to work. I taught Reconstruction to a room full of teenagers who acted like the world ended if the Wi-Fi slowed down. All day, my phone buzzed in my desk drawer. I didn't look. 3 days later, we sat in a lawyer's conference room that smelled like coffee and printer toner. My mom wore black, but it was the fancy kind of black. Pearls, perfect hair, lipstick that didn't move. My dad sat beside her, hands folded, looking bored like this was an annoying appointment. My sister sat across from me, tapping her foot, already irritated. I came alone. I didn't bring Ellie and Noah. I wasn't going to put them through another room full of people who looked at them like they didn't count. The attorney, Mr. Rusk, greeted everyone politely. Then he looked directly at my mom and said, Before we begin, I want to make something clear. Mrs. Hale was very specific about how she wanted this handled. My mom's chin lifted. Of course, she said, like she'd been running things. Mr. Rusk opened the folder. He read the standard lines first. Name, date, witnesses. Then he got to the part that changed the temperature in the room. Irene Hale leaves her home at 214 Willow Ridge, he said. To her grandson, Mason Hale. My mom blinked like she didn't understand English. My sister's foot stopped tapping. My dad's head turned sharply for the first time. Mr. Rusk continued calmly. The home is to be transferred immediately upon probate. There is no shared ownership. My mom laughed once, sharp and fake. That can't be right. Mr. Rusk didn't react. It is correct. He kept reading. Grandma left a separate account, money she'd saved quietly, to Ellie and Noah. Not in a way my parents could touch. A trust. For college, trade school, or whatever path they choose. My mom's face started turning red from the neck up. Then Mr. Rusk read the part that made my sister sit forward, greedy hope flashing across her eyes. To my daughter, Linda, he began. My mom let out a little sigh like, finally. I leave my jewelry box, he finished, and its contents. My mom's mouth dropped open. My dad made a small choking sound, like he'd swallowed wrong. Mr. Rusk didn't pause. Additionally, to Linda, I leave the quilt from the cedar chest. The blue one. My mom's hands gripped her purse so hard I thought the strap might snap. My sister blurted, What about? Mr. Rusk raised a hand, still calm. Please let me finish. Then he read the final page. The one Grandma had clearly saved for last. "There is a letter attached," he said, "to be read aloud." My mom snapped, "No." Mr. Rusk looked at her. "It's part of the will." And then he read my grandmother's words. Not all of them. He didn't need to. Enough. Enough about how she loved Ellie and Noah. Enough about how she watched my parents take from me while pretending my kids didn't exist. Enough about how she didn't want the people who humiliated children to have access to children's futures. My mom started making noises, little angry scoffs, little sharp breaths. My dad's jaw worked like he wanted to interrupt. My sister's eyes stayed locked on me like she could bully the paper into changing. Mr. Rusk finished, set the letter down, and said, "That concludes the will." For a second, nobody spoke. Then my mom exploded. She stood up so fast her chair slammed backward. "This is ridiculous." He manipulated her. My dad stood too, face blotchy. Mom was confused at the end. You know how she was. My sister pointed at me like I'd stolen something out of her purse. "You took everything." I didn't raise my voice. I just looked at Mr. Rusk. "Is there anything I need to sign today?" He nodded, already sliding papers toward me. "Yes." My mom leaned over the table. "Mason, don't you dare." I picked up the pen and signed anyway. My dad's voice went low and ugly. "You're going to regret this." That's when Mr. Rusk said, "There is one more thing." They all froze. He opened another file. Irene Hale also left documentation of loans. My mom's face tightened. "Loans." Mr. Rusk didn't smile, but his tone got a little sharper. "Yes, she kept records. She had promissory notes signed." My sister's eyes went wide. "Signed?" I felt my stomach flip because I hadn't known this part either. Mr. Rusk looked at my mom and dad. "There is a total of $18,400 in documented loans to Linda and Robert Hale over the last 7 years, and $6,200 to Kendra." My mom sputtered. Those weren't loans. That was family." Mr. Rusk's voice stayed steady. "The notes say otherwise. Repayment is due to the estate. The executor," he looked at me, "will decide the repayment schedule." My dad's face went gray. My sister made a sound like she'd been punched in the chest. And then the screaming started again, louder, messy, spilling out of the office into the hallway. Mr. Rusk opened the door and calmly asked the receptionist to call security if needed. We ended up outside in the parking lot with my mom, yelling so loudly people in the neighboring businesses were staring through their windows. When my dad slammed his car door, it echoed down the block. My mom kept going even after they got in the car. She leaned out the window and shouted, "You're not even her real grandson anymore." My hands stayed at my sides. I just watched them drive away. And as they peeled out too fast, I saw a curtain move in the apartment building across the street. A neighbor had come outside. They'd been that loud. The fallout hit exactly the way Grandma predicted. My mom called me 27 times in one day. My dad left voicemails that started with, "Listen," and ended with, "You owe us." My sister sent paragraphs about how I was stealing from your own blood. Nobody asked how Ellie was doing. Nobody asked if Noah was sleeping okay. Not one message said, "I'm sorry for what I said at the funeral." So I kept my boundaries simple. When I finally answered one call, just one, it was because I wanted to be done with the guessing. My mom's voice came through like poison wrapped in sugar. "Mason, honey, we need to talk like adults." I said, "You mean like the adult who whispered that Grandma didn't like my kids at her funeral?" She went quiet for half a beat. Then she snapped, "You're twisting it." "I'm not," I said. "And the transfers are done." Her breathing changed. "What transfers?" I didn't explain. I didn't argue numbers. I just said the line I'd been practicing in my head. "I'm not your backup bank," I told her. "And I won't fund a family my kids aren't part of." My dad grabbed the phone. Of course he did. His voice was cold. "So you're punishing us?" "No," I said. "I'm protecting my kids." He laughed like that was cute. "You think you're so noble. You're a schoolteacher, Mason. You can't handle that house. You can't handle the estate. You'll come crawling back." I looked at my kitchen table while he talked, at the little scratch marks from Ellie's craft projects, at Noah's math worksheet folded into a paper airplane. And I said, "No, just that." Then I hung up. They tried everything after that. My mom showed up at my house 2 days later with a casserole like it was a peace offering. She stood on my porch in her black coat and said, "I brought dinner. You look thin." Behind her, my dad stood with his arms crossed like a bouncer. I didn't invite them in. I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. My mom's eyes flicked past me, trying to see inside, trying to see if my kids were watching. I don't want to fight, she said, soft now. Your grandmother wouldn't want this. I almost laughed, because Grandma had literally planned for this. She wanted my kids loved? I said. You couldn't do that. My dad cut in. Are you really going to keep what you got? After everything we did for you? I stared at him. You mean the bills I paid? The mortgage help? The car repairs? Or do you mean the part where you smiled while Mom said my kids weren't liked? My mom's face hardened. You're being dramatic. I held my voice steady. I'm being done. My dad stepped forward like he wanted to push past me. Open the door. I didn't move. Leave, I said. My mom hissed, fine. Enjoy your stolen house. They left the casserole on my porch anyway, like it was a weapon. I threw it out without opening it. Not because I'm petty, because I wasn't eating their peace offering while my kids were still swallowing their shame. A week later, I took Ellie and Noah to Grandma's house. It felt strange to unlock her front door with a key that was now mine. The house smelled like her right away, clean laundry and peppermint tea. Ellie walked straight to the fridge. Her drawings were still there. Not just one, a whole line of them, held up by mismatched magnets. A green forest, a badly drawn cat, a little stick figure family where the tallest one was labeled Dad in Noah's messy handwriting. Ellie covered her mouth with her hand, eyes filling. She kept them, she whispered. Noah touched the paper like it might disappear. She said it was art, he said, voice small. She said I was good. I nodded, throat tight again. She was right. In the living room, on the side table, there was a tin of butter cookies. The kind that's never actually cookies by the time you open it. Ellie opened it. Inside was sewing stuff, of course, but also a small envelope. 2 names on it. Ellie and Noah. Ellie looked at me like she needed permission. I nodded. She opened it carefully, and inside were 2 little letters. One for each of them. Grandma's handwriting, steady and neat. Ellie read hers silently, tears falling straight down her cheeks. Noah sounded out his slowly, lips moving, determined to do it himself. Then he looked up at me and said, She said I'm her sunshine. I blinked hard and pulled them both into my arms right there in Grandma's living room. I didn't say much. I didn't need to. The house was quiet, and for once, quiet felt safe. That first holiday after everything, I didn't go to my parents' house. I didn't even consider it. I put up a tree in Grandma's living room instead. Same corner she always used. I found her old box of ornaments, the ones wrapped in tissue paper and labeled in faded marker. Ellie hung the glass angel carefully. Noah insisted on putting the star on top, even though he had to stand on a chair and stretch like his life depended on it. We made hot chocolate. We burned the first batch of cookies and ate them anyway. At one point, Ellie looked around the room and said, It feels like she's still here. I smiled small. Yeah, I said. It does. My phone stayed quiet that day, mostly because I'd blocked numbers and stopped checking the family group chat. But later that night, I sat on the porch steps with a blanket around my shoulders, listening to Ellie and Noah laugh inside. I thought about the funeral, about my mom's whisper, about my dad's smile, and about Grandma's lawyer following me to the car with an envelope, while everyone inside thought they'd just put me back in my place. They didn't see what mattered. They didn't see Grandma's handwriting. They didn't see her records. They didn't see the fact that love can be quiet, but it can also be planned. It can be protected. Inside, Ellie and Noah were arguing over which movie to watch next, like normal kids, in a house where their names were written on letters and taped to a fridge. I stayed out there a little longer, breathing in the cold air, letting it settle in my chest like a clean line drawn in fresh snow. I wasn't their wallet anymore. I was my kid's dad. And finally, that was enough. I'm on Mason's side here, because he endured years of being treated like a wallet while his parents erased his kids in public. He paid their $540 mortgage support, covered emergencies, and still showed up respectfully at his grandmother's funeral, until his mom whispered that his children weren't liked. What this story teaches us is that boundaries built quietly can speak louder than confrontation. When Mason canceled the automatic transfers and documented each step, he wasn't retaliating. He was protecting his family's dignity and financial safety. 2 practical takeaways. Always keep records of recurring payments and ensure family financial help is written, limited, and revocable.